All right, we need to talk about a walk. But this isn't just any walk. This is a journey so incredibly long, so unbelievably grueling, that it completely shatters what we think is possible for human endurance. We're talking about a journey that's been going on for almost 30 years, and believe it or not, it's still not over.
So let me ask you this. What do you think is the longest, continuous, unbroken walk on the entire planet? And I'm not talking about a bunch of different hikes strung together, or a trip that uses planes and boats to hop over the oceans. I mean one single continuous path from a starting point to a finish line, done entirely on foot. To really get a sense of the scale here, let's think about Dave Kunst. He was the first person verified to have walked around the world. I mean, what an incredible achievement, right? That was about 27,000 kilometers. But he used planes to get across the water, so the journey was broken up into different chunks. The journey we're diving into today, called the Goliath Expedition, is on a whole other level. It's one single, unbroken path of over 58,000 kilometers, all on foot.
So who is the person behind this absolutely insane mission? His name is Carl Bushby, a former British paratrooper. And on November 1st, 1998, with just $500 in his pocket, he took his very first step at the southern tip of Chile. His vow? To walk all the way home to England.
He gave himself 2 rules, and they were brutally simple. Rule number 1, absolutely no transport. No cars, no trains, no boats, no planes. Every single inch had to be covered by his own 2 feet. And rule number 2, if he had to stop the journey for any reason, and I mean any reason, he had to go back to the exact GPS coordinate of his last footstep and start from there. No cheating.
Now, Carl's original plan was to be home in about 8 years. He figured he'd walk about 19 kilometers a day. Sounds reasonable, right? Well, the reality has been a little different. He's been on the road for over 27 years, and he's still not home. This journey was going to demand way, way more than he could have ever possibly imagined.
So, his journey kicks off in South America, and right away, the planet just throws everything it has at him. This was not a gentle warm-up. This was a full-on trial by fire, wind, and ice from day one.
Just to get from the bottom of the Americas to the top, he had to survive a laundry list of Earth's most extreme environments. He battled the insane, relentless winds of Patagonia, the thin air and freezing cold of the Andes, the blistering, life-sucking heat of the Atacama Desert, and then he had to cross the infamous Darien Gap, a lawless jungle filled with drug traffickers, armed gangs, and all sorts of deadly wildlife. And yeah, in that Darien Gap, the human dangers were every bit as real as the natural ones. He actually got arrested by Panamanian police and was thrown in jail for 18 days. But here's the crazy part. After they let him go, what did he do? True to his rule, he walked right back to the exact spot where they captured him and started walking again.
So after years and years of fighting his way up the Americas, Carl finally stood at the edge of the continent. But now he faced what was, without a doubt, the single most dangerous physical challenge of the entire trip: the frozen sea between Alaska and Russia. The Bering Strait.
Crossing the Bering Strait it was almost a suicide mission. He wasn't walking on a solid sheet of ice. He was hopping across a chaotic sea of constantly moving, cracking, and shifting ice floes. He often had to literally swim in near-freezing Arctic water just to get from one piece of ice to the next, all while knowing a sudden violent storm could kick up at any moment.
This 240-kilometer crossing took such a massive toll that at one point, Carl went 14 days without any real proper sleep. I mean, can you then begin to imagine the physical and mental exhaustion? It's something most of us just can't comprehend.
So he'd done it. He'd beaten deserts, jungles, mountains, and even a frozen ocean. But right after he arrived in Russia, he slammed into an obstacle that he couldn't walk through, he couldn't climb over, and he couldn't swim across. And that was international bureaucracy. He finally set foot on Russian soil, only to be immediately arrested. And you're probably thinking, why? Well, he had a valid visa, but the Russian authorities said the Bering Strait isn't an official port of entry. So they arrested him, and then they deported him all the way back to the UK.
Eventually, after some high-profile help, they let him back in. But he was caught in this just soul-crushing, bureaucratic nightmare. His visa only let him be in the country for 90 days at a time, so he'd walk for 3 months, then he'd have to leave and wait 9 long months for a new visa. This ridiculous cycle went on until 2013, when Russia just banned him from the country entirely for 5 years.
So what does a man who walks for a living do when he gets a 5-year ban? He walks, of course. To protest, he flew to Los Angeles and walked 4,800 kilometers
all the way across the United States to the Russian embassy in Washington, D.C., just to make his point. Unbelievable. Eventually, that Russian ban was lifted. And after years and years of struggling, he finally walked out of Russia and started his trek across Central Asia. But, the world wasn't quite done throwing impossible obstacles in his way. He found himself in Turkmenistan, ready to press on, but the border into Iran was closed. And then the global pandemic hit, trapping him completely. It really looked like a total dead end. Game over. I mean, what on earth could he do now? He decided to go around Iran, and his solution was just genius. He decided he would swim across the Caspian Sea to get to Azerbaijan. For 31 straight days, he swam for 6 hours a day, pulling all of his gear behind him in a tiny little kayak, which he would then sleep on at night.
When someone asked him about this insane swim, his answer tells you everything you need to know about his mindset. He just said, "I don't like swimming, but it was necessary." It's that simple, that relentless, that focused.
The sheer amount of time that has passed is just staggering. As he was walking, he said, when I left, Tony Blair was prime minister. Now Britain has had 5 new prime ministers. While he was just putting one foot in front of the other, the entire world and his home country had completely changed. A whole generation had gone by. So today, Carl has about 3,000 kilometers left to go. He has to cross the rest of Europe and then deal with one last kind of bizarre obstacle, the Channel Tunnel that connects France to the UK. You're strictly forbidden from walking in it. He's actually going to need special permission to use the service tunnel just to take his final steps back onto British soil. When he finally gets back to his hometown, he will have walked over 58,000 kilometers. To put that in perspective, that is 1.5 times the circumference of the entire planet, an unbroken line drawn across the globe by one man's feet. Through all of it, the arrests, the frozen oceans, the political walls, the pandemic, Carl has held on to this one core belief. Life doesn't stop, it just changes course. He never saw an obstacle as the end. He just saw it as a detour. And that really leaves us with one last big question. This journey has been his entire adult life. He left as a young man and he's going to return as a middle-aged man to a world that is completely transformed. So after almost 3 decades of constant forward motion, what do you think he's going to find when he finally, truly stops?